You know, it's fascinating how often the smallest things seem to create the biggest waves, like dropping that one little pebble in a pond,
Hmm.
and suddenly ripples are stretching all the way out. You can barely see the edges. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How much do those tiny actions, those quick choices we make, even just a few words or, a brief connection with someone, how much do they really shape everything that follows?
It's a huge question.
That feeling, that sense of powerful kind of hidden connections in everyday life, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've pulled together a whole stack of sources for this deep dive articles, research, covering psychology, social science, relationship stuff.
Right. And even some incredible personal stories, people sharing how they've seen this play out.
Exactly. The material really ranges, doesn't it?
It does. We've got academic studies digging into the nuts and bolts of things like altruism and social
Oh,
networks, all the way through to blog posts with practical tips on kindness or communication. And yeah, those really compelling real-world anecdotes you mentioned.
So our mission here is to sift through all of that. We want to pull out the key nuggets, the important bits, to really understand these powerful, often unseen forces, the ones that play in the little things we all do and experience day in, day out.
Okay, let's unpack this for you.
So let's start with these small acts and how they might create those big ripples. Our sources point to, well, a bunch of seemingly minor things that they suggest have pretty significant impacts.
Like what specifically?
Things like really letting someone talk when they need to vent or just be heard, properly listening,
Important.
or offering genuine encouragement,
Wow.
sharing an idea, even if you think it's small. And yeah, even something fundamental like voting comes up in these discussions about how individual actions can sort of scale up.
And a lot of those tie directly into kindness, which is a huge theme in several sources. We see examples like cooking a meal for a neighbor who's having a rough time, or leaving snacks for your colleagues, maybe volunteering, donating books.
Little things, really.
Yeah, tiny things. But the idea, and this comes too strongly, is that each small act of kindness can impact others in ways you might never even know.
Right.
It's not just a one-off thing. It gets observed, it's passed along, and that initial small gesture can grow into something much bigger.
And the research actually backs this up, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Studies on altruism, doing things for others without expecting something back, show it significantly improves what researchers call subjective well-being.
Which is basically feeling good about your life.
Yeah, essentially your overall emotional state, life satisfaction.
Yep.
And what's really fascinating is it's not just the person receiving the kindness who benefits.
Uh-huh.
It also improves the well-being of the person doing the kind act, and even people who just watch it happen.
Wow, okay. So just seeing it helps.
Apparently so. And they often describe the relationship as bidirectional. It goes both ways, meaning happier people tend to engage in more altruism, and engaging in altruism makes people happier. It's like a positive feedback loop.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
And this isn't just one study. It's been seen across different cultures in different forms: volunteering, donating blood, spontaneous acts. One source even mentioned that during the really acute stress of the pandemic,
Yeah.
people were actually more likely to show pro-social behavior. Kind of surprising, maybe.
Yeah, you might expect the opposite. So everyone involved gets a boost, in a way.
That seems to be the core of what one source calls the rebound effect. The small kind act positively impacts the giver's mental health just as much, or maybe even more, than the receiver's.
Like the classic example of a smile.
Exactly. Offering a smile, it boosts comfort for the receiver, sure, but just doing it can genuinely lift the giver's mood too. It feels tiny, but that moment could totally shift someone's difficult day.
Okay, but here's a wrinkle one source brought up. What about, like, unintended consequences?
Ah, yes. The complexity.
Yeah. Like, if you let a car merge into heavy traffic, that's kind to that driver, right?
You're
But what about the 10 cars stuck behind you now? Is it unkind to them? Does your good intention cancel out the negative outcome for others?
That's a tricky one.
This source kind of pushes back on the idea of pure goodness. It suggests that choices you see as kind can sometimes make other people angry if they don't share your values.
Hmm.
Their example was like making vegan food choices for a group where maybe not everyone is vegan. Good intention, potentially awkward result.
It's a really important nuance to bring in. Reality is messy.
Definitely.
But while we have to acknowledge that complexity, that potential for negative side effects, the overall weight of the research we looked at still points strongly towards a net positive impact from these acts of kindness.
So generally, it's worth it.
It seems so.
Oh.
As one source put it really well, the influence never ends with only the person in front of us. That ripple effect is real, even if not every single ripple is perfectly smooth or positive for everyone involved immediately.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's shift gears a bit then to something really foundational that comes up again and again in the sources. The power of connection. Relationships.
Hugely important.
They state it pretty clearly. Social connection is vital for the well-being of young adults. And, more broadly too. It plays a massive role in shaping our emotional, psychological, and social well-being throughout our entire lives.
And the research here is, well, it's kind of startling, actually.
Oh.
There's this one huge meta-analysis mentioned. It found that strong social connections literally improve your odds of survival by 50%. 50!
Wow, that's huge. Survival odds.
Yeah. And to put it in perspective, they compared low social interaction to other major health risks.
Okay.
It's apparently comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day or having an alcohol use disorder.
Yeah.
More harmful than not exercising and twice as harmful as obesity.
Good grief. That really reframes it. It's not just nice to have friends.
Not at all. And loneliness specifically showed up in another study as a really powerful predictor of depressive symptoms. Even more so than things like demographics or how stressed someone felt they were. This is fundamentally about health and how long we live.
Incredible.
And you see it in specific health situations, too. There was a study on diabetes education. They compared a standard lecture class to a group approach where people did team building, shared information.
More interactive.
Exactly. And the group approach led to significantly better health outcomes, lower blood sugar, more weight loss. It really highlighted the tangible power of that peer support being in it together.
Right.
And another study, this one on middle-aged men, found that having low social activities correlated with higher rates of death from cardiovascular issues.
Wow. Okay, so the connections matter deeply for health. And you mentioned it starts early.
Yeah, the sources point out that forming those early social ties, like making friends in the first few weeks of college, can have really long-lasting effects.
On what kinds of things?
On things like flourishing later on, feeling good about life, and also on reducing depressive symptoms down the line. Those early, maybe seemingly casual connections, they really lay some important groundwork.
Huh. And there was something about an empathy perception gap. What's that?
Yeah, that was interesting. It suggests the young adults often underestimate how empathetic their peers actually are.
They think others care less than they do.
Basically, yeah. They think others are less understanding, less likely to care. And because they think that, they're less likely to reach out or try to connect in the first place. Fear of rejection, maybe.
Makes sense. So how do you fix that?
Well, interventions that teach about community care, about shared vulnerability, they seem to help bridge that gap. They encourage what the researchers called social risk-taking.
Like
Just starting conversations, joining groups, putting yourself out there a bit more. One study found an 11% increase in those kinds of behaviors after an intervention like that, which led to bigger social networks for those people.
So just knowing others might be more empathetic helps people connect more.
It seems so. And they even noted that really brief interactions, even just with strangers, can give your mood a little lift.
Yeah, I can see that. And when we bring this into our closest relationships, like partners.
Right. The idea of the butterfly effect
Yeah.
actually gets used explicitly in one source there
Really?
to describe how even small actions, small choices, can have these really significant consequences for the dynamics between partners over time.
Okay, so what kinds of small actions?
Well, the source emphasizes stuff that might sound basic, but it's highlighted as crucial sort of micro behaviors, things like prioritizing clear and respectful communication,
Right.
nurturing love through small acts of kindness. There's kindness again, and approaching conflicts with compassion and understanding. These aren't necessarily grand gestures. They're the daily choices that the sources suggest are key to navigating the complexity and stopping small issues from, blowing up.
That makes a lot of sense. What about like unspoken stuff, body language?
Oh yeah, nonverbal communication is huge. Facial expressions, posture, your tone of voice, all of that transmits so much information, so much emotion, often without us even realizing it or controlling it fully.
And there was a finding about long-term couples.
Yeah, kind of counterintuitive maybe. A survey mentioned that couples who had been together longer were actually less likely to practice what they called nonverbal immediacies,
Things
like maintaining physical closeness, making eye contact, using a warm tone of voice. The source suggested this might be an area that established couples could consciously work on.
huh, interesting. Like you get comfortable and stop doing the little things.
Perhaps. And while we all recognize basic facial expressions, like a smile meaning happy or a frown meaning sad,
Yeah.
the source also notes that smiles aren't always about happiness. Sometimes they can signal nervousness or discomfort or other things too. Adds another layer of complexity to reading people.
Okay, let's talk about something else that ripples out profoundly. Our words and emotions.
Big ones.
It's actually incredible when you stop to think about it. One source, citing research, says that a single word can alter perceptions.
It's one word.
Apparently, the idea is that words create reality, not just out there in the world, but inside us through our inner dialogue, how we talk to ourselves.
And this power of language gets explored even deeper in other sources. The Bonn Institute source talks about how language doesn't just describe our thoughts and feelings, it actively shapes them.
How does that work?
Well, think about framing, the way you phrase something. Their example was using a term like wave of refugees.
Okay.
Even if you don't mean it negatively, that frame, that metaphor of a wave, implicitly suggests a certain kind of reaction, right? Like maybe you need to build dams or something. It shapes the response.
Wow, I never thought of it like that.
And the source also points out how grammar itself can influence blame. How you structure a sentence about, say, an accident can subtly shift who seems responsible. And maybe the most fascinating bit, grammatical gender in different languages can actually change how we perceive inanimate objects.
What? Like how?
So a bridge is feminine in German, die Brücke, but masculine in Spanish, el puente. And studies show German speakers tend to describe bridges using more stereotypically feminine adjectives, beautiful, elegant, while Spanish speakers use more masculine ones, strong, long, just because of the grammar.
That is wild. So language really shapes our whole perception.
It seems to. And this, of course, loops right back to our relationships and even how we relate to ourselves.
How so?
Well, as one source points out, our words obviously affect our relationships with others, but internally. That negative self-labeling.
Like calling yourself an idiot or a screw-up.
Exactly. That's a type of cognitive distortion. It really impacts your mood, your behavior, and it can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You talk yourself into failing.
Oof, yeah.
So using positive language, both internally and externally, isn't just about being Pollyanna-ish. Sources highlight it as genuinely important for well-being and communication.
Okay, and layered on top of words is emotions.
Right. The concept of emotional contagion.
Sounds catchy. What is it?
It's this really interesting phenomenon where social interactions can literally trigger emotional contagion between individuals. Basically, emotions spread like a cold almost.
How? Just by talking?
It can be triggered by seeing someone's facial expressions, their body language, even through physiological synchronization like people's heart rates or breathing patterns starting to align when they interact closely.
Seriously, our bodies sync up.
Yeah. And the sources note that neuroscience tools like brain scans or physiological measures are actually considered more accurate for measuring this than just asking people how they feel, because it can happen unconsciously.
Okay, that's fascinating. Where do we see this playing out?
Well, a huge example recently was during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially on social media.
Ah, yes. The doom scrolling.
Pretty much. Users weren't just expressing their own negative feelings, anxiety, fear, anger. They were spreading them. Through this process of emotional contagion, individual emotions started to generalize into what researchers termed group emotions.
So the whole platform felt anxious or angry.
In a sense, yeah. And they found factors like event stimulation, like when something happens that clashes with widely held values, and event publicness.
Yeah.
How many people know about it really amplified the spread of those negative emotions.
Makes sense. More fuel for the fire.
But it's not just negative emotions that spread, thankfully.
Oh, good.
Research like that famous Fowler and Christakis study that got a lot of attention showed how positive emotions, like happiness, can also spread through social networks.
How far?
From person to person, out to their friends, and even to their friends' friends.
Huh.
Like ripples in a pond again.
So, okay. We've covered tiny acts of kindness, creating these widespread good vibes. The absolutely profound, like health-determining power of human connection. And the contagious nature of our words and our emotions. It all seems to circle back to this big idea, often called the butterfly effect, right?
Exactly. That concept that small actions, small initial conditions can have these massive, sometimes completely unpredictable consequences down the line.
Yeah. Now, one source did caution against oversimplifying it, like thinking it's just fate or coincidence.
Right. It often involves active choices along the way.
But that core principle, small changes leading to big impacts, that seems powerfully supported by so many experiences we read about.
Oh, absolutely. You see it so vividly in some of the personal stories shared in the sources.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, someone changes their seat in a class on the first day, ends up sitting next to someone who becomes their best friend for decades.
Wow.
Someone holds a door open for a stranger, strikes up a conversation, leads to a 15-year marriage.
Just from holding a door.
Apparently. Someone deciding to go to one specific job interview, even though they were burnt out, and it leads to a whole fulfilling career path they never expected.
Okay, these are great.
Pulling a particular magazine out of a trash can, subscribing to it, then meeting their future spouse via an online dating site mentioned in an article in that very magazine.
That's incredibly specific.
Isn't it? Drunkenly walking into a random bar in Portugal, meeting someone, falling in love, moving countries,
Amazing.
shelving books in a different section at work one day because their back hurt, meeting their future spouse in that aisle, answering a ringing payphone in a dorm hallway on a whim, leading to marriage and a child.
You couldn't make this stuff up.
Right. Or just randomly deciding last minute to go to a Halloween party and meeting the love of your life there. Tiny choices, huge outcomes.
It's not always positive, is it? The sources mention negative ripples, too.
That's crucial to remember, absolutely. There were stories where a small catalyst led to really profound negative consequences.
Such as?
Someone trying to be helpful in a situation led to a severe accident, resulting in terrible injuries, years of rehab, PTSD.
Oh, that's rough.
Dating choices that started casually, small decisions early on, leading down a path that ended in a history of domestic violence.
Oh, no.
Meeting someone transformative through social media, building a whole new life, but then having it end with their death and really complicated grief. These stories remind us that the ripple effect is incredibly powerful, but yeah, it's not always positive, and it's certainly not always predictable.
So how do we make sense of that unpredictability?
Well, if we connect this back to the bigger picture, social systems, like our communities, economies, even global politics, they're incredibly complex systems. They're dynamic, they're nonlinear, meaning small inputs don't always lead to proportionally small outputs. And that makes precise prediction really difficult.
So the butterfly effect we see in these personal stories, that's like a microcosm of how these bigger systems work.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrates this sensitivity to initial conditions that's inherent in complex systems.
So just looking for simple A causes B patterns isn't really enough.
Probably not. Our sources suggest we need to learn to sort of navigate the chaos that comes with complexity. There are concepts like self-organized criticality.
Okay.
It's an analogy, really. The idea is that systems can naturally evolve towards a fragile state where they're highly sensitive, and then just a single fluke, one small disruption.
That's like the butterfly wing flap.
Or a more concrete example from one source,
Wow.
a massive container ship getting stuck sideways in a critical waterway.
Ah, the Suez Canal blockage.
Right. That one single event caused these drastic cascading changes throughout the entire global supply chain system. It showed how interconnected and sensitive things are.
But it's not all just random flukes and chaos, right? People try to make positive change intentionally.
Definitely. And that idea of intentionality in creating ripples is also there in the sources. Social change projects, for instance. They can be designed specifically with the goal of creating positive ripples that go way beyond their immediate stated objectives, aiming to contribute to broader systemic change.
So you can try to aim the ripples?
You can try. And fittingly, maybe a bit meta, the sources also mention the crucial role of storytelling itself in helping us understand all this complexity.
How we talk about the ripples affects how we see them.
Exactly. Stories help us create meaning out of what can feel like chaos. They inspire empathy. They can shift mindsets and values. Storytelling is kind of how we make sense of these powerful, often hidden connections and consequences all around us.
Wow. Okay. So we've really journeyed from the simplest act of kindness and the absolute necessity of human connection for our health
Vital.
through the shaping power of our words and how emotions literally spread between us.
Yeah.
And seeing how all these threads feed into that pervasive butterfly effect in our own lives and out in the wider world. It's a lot.
It really is. But the core findings from this deep dive seem pretty clear
Yeah.
and honestly quite powerful.
What would you say they boil down to?
Well, first, kindness isn't just a one-way street. It creates this positive chain reaction, boosting well-being for the giver, the receiver, and even people just watching.
Okay. Good takeaway.
Second, social connection isn't just nice. The research strongly suggests it's a critical factor for our health and how long we live. Maybe as important as things we focus on more, like diet and exercise.
Right. Need to prioritize that.
Third, our words are incredibly potent. They don't just describe reality, they can actively shape it inside our own heads and in how we influence others.
Choose words carefully. Got it.
And fourth, emotions.
Hmm.
Definitely contagious. They spread through our interactions in ways we can see and ways we probably don't even notice.
Okay. So knowing all that.
Yeah, this really raises an important question for you listening right now. Given that our smallest actions, our choices, our words, our connections, given they can have such profound, far-reaching, and often unpredictable impacts, both good and bad, how does understanding this power maybe change the way you approach your daily life? What kind of ripples do you feel called to create in the world around you?
That's the big question, isn't it? So knowing all this, what small thing might you do differently today?